All right. Okay. Hey, I think we are ready to rock. Welcome to our webinar today on some platform updates that we've made recently. We really want to show them to you. We've got three big things we want to talk about. My name is Chris Bloom. Good to talk to you again. I ran a webinar a few weeks ago and excited to talk some tech with you. But first, let's talk about what we do every single week. Every Thursday at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, we do a demo. We just show off what Knapsack can do. We run through it. We show how it helps with streamlining a lot of your team's process around design systems, the efficiencies and the cool things that we can offer your team. So please check that out every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. All right. Also, we have some very cool upcoming events. We have a number of design systems leadership summits. We have one in Austin on November 14th. We have one in Atlanta, January 30th coming up. And we have more planned for New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and Philadelphia as well. It's a really, really good chance to get together, talk design systems, talk where the industry is going, talk with others who are involved in big teams doing this stuff, and the trials and tribulations that they've gone through. Super important. I got to attend one of these very, very recently. It was really, really valuable. So check these out again, November 14th and January 30th in your neighborhood. All right. We got a couple of folks that are going to talk with us today. We got Matt, our director of design. We have Josh, software developer with us. We're going to talk about some specific things that we've built and we've added to Knapsack just in the last couple of months. So to start with, let's talk about what we're doing with Angular. Josh, if you would like, I can stop sharing.
Yeah, I'll jump into it here. Let me grab my share window. Cool. Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Josh Mabry, software developer here at Knapsack. Kind of across the full stack. So one of the big things we worked on during Q3 was an update to our Angular renderer. So now we have first-class support for Angular components inside of Knapsack. Our prior version served us well, but it was starting to show its age. It was built for Angular 14. And over the last year, we started seeing an increased interest in Angular component libraries from our customers through either their custom libraries or some of the component libraries that are out there like PrimeNG or Angular Material UI. So yeah, with this, Angular has first-class support within Knapsack. And so if you're familiar with any of our other renderers, React web components, we now have the kind of feature parity with those. So all in all, it's similar functionality to the other renderers, but some of the Angular specifics that we now support come by way of content projection, which is how Angular handles their slots. We support their ng template system. With the content projection support, leveraging our slot system as in our other renderers, you're able to just kind of put in the name of the slot, and based off of the component itself, it'll infer whether it needs to be a directive or one of these wrapping components as Angular works. Let's Cool. And same with the template system. So just by adding the name of the template within the component, the render is able to infer the necessary components to wrap the
Wow.
content here. And of course, you can see this here down in our usage block, and it comes through with all of the necessary props and such. So jumping over to this table component, this comes directly from the PrimeMG component library. So if you don't have your own component library and you're just using a base, you can directly support that within Knapsack. And some of these component libraries are going to have specific needs around their templating and directives, PrimeNG being one. So we also have support for just arbitrary HTML within these text blocks. This allows for things such as table, where we now have a data-driven demo. And we can see here by just adding an array of objects, essentially, and that
Uh-huh.
renders kind of directly. This is essentially pulled directly from the documentation of PrimeNG. So it's really easy to get spun up and going kind of however you need to work your Angular systems. Another big feature we added with the Angular renderer here is automatic event binding. So using the output directives within Angular, you set up your events, obviously depending on what you need for your system. And then Knapsack automatically sets it up with a logging system. So by clicking this, we now can see that
Cool.
event is working perfectly. You're ready to roll and put it in your system wherever you need it. So yeah, that's kind of the breakdown of the Angular components, our Angular renderer. This now is probably our most feature-rich renderer in the system. And with these advancements, we're now able to pull this back into our other renderers for React web components and just make the whole system that much better. So yeah, we're really excited to have launched this, and we have a few customers using this in their day-to-day. So it's awesome.
That's awesome. And I know we're kind of built on React. We had a massive support for React. We supported every kind of whiz-bang feature of React, and getting Angular up to that same level of support has been very, very cool, because a lot of people are finding out use Angular, probably as many as React for the folks that we've worked with. So thank you so much, Josh.
Yeah.
By the way, jump in. Any questions you've got, drop them right into chat. If you want to use the Q&A system or you want to use the chat system, please do it. We are here to answer your questions. There's a lot of really cool stuff that we're talking about today. Okay, next up is our slots system and all the new things that we have added to slots. Matt, if you'd like to talk about this, introduce yourself. I'll stop sharing and let you share.
All right, yeah. Hi, I'm Matt Gorman. I head up design here at Knapsack. Um, very much tied to everything we do. So here we go. Um, Oops and stuff. So for a long time, slots and how you've been able to kind of interact and play with your existing components has been limited to how you structured them in your actual templates. And so if there was things like I want something to align one way or the other, you'd have to go and update your slot to kind of handle those use cases. And a lot of times what we were seeing is, especially in early phases of design and kind of prototyping out different ideas, you didn't want to actually like codify those options until you were sure that you needed them. So what we've done is kind of hold in the ability to play with those items and kind of see how something could work, or could change maybe another variant, maybe just a little tighter controls for your end users, and allows kind of quickly iterating through that without having to, again, like codify those decisions before you're ready to. So an example, let's say in this call out, right, I have one button. It's already built to handle anything I want to put in this slot. But if I go and I add a second button, this component is just going to stack those on top of each other, because that's just the way that it's built and how it's structured. So instead of that, I want them to be horizontally aligned. So I can now go to my layout options here, pop that open, and change my layout to horizontal. And now, items are a little too tight, so I can adjust the spacing in between those by just putting a little gap there using my already existing tokens.
Yeah.
Let's say I feel like now that I have two buttons, the space between the buttons and the text is a little tight. So I also want to go in and just drop some additional space between there. And so all these kind of things are the decisions and tweaks that a designer might do in Figma, or engineer might be doing locally when they're actually putting these things in and getting them ready for production. And this allows kind of that in-between phase to really fine tune and show like, hey, this is exactly what we're going for. And while you're doing that, it's writing out that code. So it's still using all your components, and it's just wrapping that content in a simple div using all of your own tokens to create variables and all of your styles, so that way this code could be, if you wanted to, used in production, right? So it's not just some idea in Figma or anything like that where you're going to have to recreate that, it's a very easy handoff to get it from here into your application. Another
This
thing we
really
did, go ahead.
This really bridges that gap between having like a stable full of components and then actually using them in some kind of real prototype, right? Because there's always just those little
Right.
spacings, those little, margins or whatever to get stuff positioned exactly right. And this means you don't have to go make 100 little containers as components, right, to
Yes.
stick the stuff into.
Yes, and especially when you have your token structure set up, it makes it really easy to kind of guide your teams and consumers, to use those values that you've set up to restrict them in a positive way, so that you're not getting and having to go in and double check in a Figma file. Oh, is that 8 pixels or is that 10 pixels? So, like, I got to open inspector and see. You can just look at it and see, oh, it's using spacing scale 4. Great. And along with that, we also added, ability to drag and drop and update the order of items, so you can quickly flip those around. There's additional options on there too, right? Like by default, this is all left aligned. Let's say I just want to shove it over to the right. I don't know why I would do that, but I can. All of these options and controls are very much based on Figma's auto layout. So for anyone that's familiar, especially designers familiar with auto layout, it's going to feel pretty comfortable. Like even the names of what they are is in line with those. You also have, for different context, theming abilities when it comes into our collections features, and even the ability to use CSS classes that will just add right onto that div that we showed. And so that's helpful for, if you're a team that uses things like Twig or not Twig, Tailwind, or any other sort of class-based system where you're not having to, have someone go in and run those by themselves. You can actually get those demoed in your actual code. And so, basic flows are there. And then it's also really helpful for when you're kind of just building out some initial things. Maybe you want to have a grid of cards, but no one's built a grid component yet that handles that spacing on its own, right? So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add a card. By default, the thing's massive. It takes up the whole screen, right? And I want to have just a simple 3-up set of cards. And again, by default, a browser is just going to stack these things on top of each other. And now I can just pop in there, make it horizontal, put a little gap in there. Say I want some extra spacing again around there, and even pull it in a little on the sides. And that's just going to, quickly be able to get that presentation in place. And then as a team, you can decide, do we want to just keep doing it this way? Do we want to build a grid component that would make it a little quicker to just drop a couple cards in, right? But this is really targeted towards getting those decisions closer to the code faster, and then making it easier to kind of finalize those. And all of this is available anywhere where you have a render, right? Anywhere you get your slots and you have your schema form, you can do all the same controls, switch things around, do what you need.
Really important to point out, like you just said, right? We were looking at an individual component just a second ago, right? So we have this benefit of these slots on the overall prototyping, but we also have the benefit of them down in the card component itself, right? In that slot. Very cool. All right. So very cool. Thank you for that. This is really powerful because it's really easy to show stakeholders a whole thing built, and I'm air quoting built because, right, a lot of people want to be like, cool, let's get this to production, right? You're like, hold on, we're still prototyping. You can arrange this stuff and get it in front of people and have them kind of kick the wheels on it super early.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's a really good way to kind of identify gaps in your system, right? Like I
gaps.
think a lot.
That's a good one. Sorry.
A lot of times as a system engineer, right, you feel like you've figured out and solved all the use cases, and then someone always comes in with one thing that could potentially break, or hey, there's this edge case I need solved. And this can help identify those edge cases and then bring that conversation back to, again, like, do we need to codify this? Or hey, did you just try using, you know, these props together or this option? And you can go from a simple request that would have been a whole new feature build to, oh, someone just didn't know we had, you know, an existing option over here. And all of a sudden you've eliminated work altogether and everybody can move on.
Awesome, awesome. This ties in great to what I've been working on because as you saw in Matt's dropdown, there were a lot of token values. Tokens are a big thing in Knapsack, and they're also a big thing over in the Figma world, right? Figma has a concept called variables, which is where you go and you capture all the little tiny rules about your design system, right? What does medium gap mean, or like small margin, right? We want to capture those things and we want to use them across all of our components. We use them in slots, as we just saw, but we also need to be able to get them into Knapsack from Figma. So I'm going to show you what we're doing to get all of our Figma variables out of Figma and over into Knapsack. So this is a Figma example, some of our sandbox components here. If you've had the chance, probably everybody in this call is already aware of Figma variables. They were released about a year ago, right? And this is Figma's approach to capturing all of these tokens. They got a great UI, and we have first-class support to get these out of Figma and get these over to Knapsack. So you can see this grid right here. This is the set of variables and, you know, arbitrarily grouped, okay? Across the top here, these columns are modes, right? It's this idea you have a value, but it doesn't actually resolve to something until it's in some mode. Are we light? Are we dark? Are we brand A? Are we brand B? Okay. We want to bring that same concept over to Knapsack. So we have this very cool little plugin. It's in the Figma plugins ecosystem already. You'll be able to find it. Search for Knapsack with a KN. And all it does is it lets you grab all your vars and dump it to a JSON file. So we're going to watch this dump to a JSON file. There we go. Tokens for JSON. Okay. I'm going to hop right over to a fresh Knapsack instance. Okay. So we are ready to bring some variables in. You can kind of see our vanilla tokens, which we already have in Knapsack. This is our Toby site right now. You can see on the left, tokens with values and groups. This, what we're about to see, is going to be a lot more dynamic. I'm going to import these variables that we just pulled in. We're going to let it think for just a second. And everything that we just had over in Figma, we can get to now in Knapsack. So there is our grid, all of our same modes, all of our same variables, and the various groups available to us. Everything that you see here is now available over in the slots layout options. It's available as CSS variables inside of your components as they build. So, and again, all of this just becomes JSON as part of your Knapsack build and your Knapsack project. So super reusable, super transportable as a data layer there. So yeah, any questions about Figma vars or going from Figma to Knapsack? Do we have anything we want to talk about anymore? Hit me with questions. Oh, we got a question here from anonymous attendee. When it says, when you're thinking about tokens and multiple brands, how does that connect? Great question. So over in our concepts of collections, variables, and modes here, we like to think of brands as modes. I like to think of like, you know, if I have a value called background page, here's a great example, okay? My background page does not have a value until it is applied to some mode. You can see here, Arcadia Light, that's our brand. Arcadia Dark, basis light, basis dark. So what this does is it allows what we're doing with tokens to be really dynamic to the way the token is used. I hope that answer I hope we're looking for there. Awesome. Next question. How do you keep your tokens updated and perhaps even different versions as we have the design system in different stages? So we currently have a unidirectional flow right now. Figma pulls into Knapsack. When we get into versioning tokens, obviously this is data, right? We can do anything we want with Git and version control there. We currently don't have the ability to say like, hey, let's make a collections version 1, version 2, version 3. But there's nothing stopping you from releasing those as published packages. A lot of the Knapsack flow allows you to take your components, take your tokens, and publish those as consumable packages for the rest of the people in your organization, right? We frequently see this, like, here's V1 of our design system. Okay, marketing, okay, engineering, pull this package in, install it, and use it. Oh, we've released V1.1, right? We fixed some spelling errors. Publish that package, and it's up to those teams to consume it. So I would take that approach to tokens more as like thinking about this as versioned packages versus something in a UI that you would switch between. All right, what other info comes over from Figma? Props, variables, other component info. Currently, right now, the only thing we dump is variables data. Variables, mode, value data today. There is lots of other stuff in Figma, and I think we would want to talk about what we're doing with our new Figma work there. And I'm not the best person to talk to about that. I think Matt or Josh can kind of approach this, but would you two like to talk a little bit about what we're doing with our new Figma integration? If we got a couple minutes to talk about it.
Yeah, so like what Chris showed was very much just our plugin targeting the variables data. But we have a totally separate Figma integration that we call design sources, where you can connect your Figma file and we'll pull in your components, your frames, your spec from your components. And what we do with that is, one, we allow kind of connecting and creating that reference point between here's my button pattern. It has this React template, this Vue template, and then here's the Figma component all in one kind of space. And then so across the board, you can compare your React schema versus your Figma schema, make sure, hey, we're got specs misaligned, or we're calling it this one thing over here and another thing over here. Like, again, identifying those gaps to kind of smooth that handoff process down and make it a lot easier. And then the bigger piece we do is, once you attach and like put that source connection in, we pull all of the assets out of Figma, so you get nice, clean, constantly available to update asset like images to use in your documentation. And so that's even like if you connect a component to a pattern, or a Figma component to a pattern, it's dynamically going to pull every variant you make. So you don't have to go in and be like, oh, we had small, medium, and large buttons, and then we decided to add extra large across the board, right? And a lot of times that actually creates 10 to 12 Figma variants because of how it's structured. And then so those would dynamically just pop in here. And so it's going to keep your docs updated. It's going to keep your teams informed faster. But then we also have the ability with what we refer to as Figma tiles, which is just kind of creating those cards, but letting you pick and choose what assets you want to put into your docs. Like to kind of use it almost a little bit like a Figma dam in a sense, where you can keep your docs imagery up to date using all the like clean design stuff instead of having to pull in iframes or static images that get out of date really quick.
Yeah, and I pulled up our example in Toby, our internal design system. As you can see here, all these tiles showing the button in various states are pulled directly from Figma. These weren't manually entered. So just by adding this component block, you get to see essentially every version of the button here, and the props as well come over and map to the correct data types and values if applicable. It really speeds up the ability to, well, just integrate with Figma and get those designs into Knapsack closer to the code and ready to work on. It's a really powerful feature and just gets these spaces set up that much faster. So we're really happy with it.
Yeah, we really heard a lot of feedback that like teams want Figma to be this, very powerful design source of truth, and they wanted a lot of the technical assets pulled into a system that lets those design decisions get closer to code, right? And that's what this does. We get to connect Figma and pull all this in. So again, everything Josh is showing here is just automatically generated from our Figma design source.
Yeah, and we always
Also,
appreciate not typing, so much. So that's always nice.
I put a link to this. It's public, so you can actually go check this out yourself if you want. Awesome. All right. Any other questions? Thanks for coming, folks. Really appreciate your time today. Make sure reach out to us. hello@knapsack.cloud if you want to talk. And again, any questions, hit us up. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.